3 sentences. That's all it took to flip my world upside down. A cousin I barely remembered was dead, and he'd left me $5 million. The letter came at noon. Texas heat pressed against the porch, and even the cicadas sounded like they were swearing at the sun. The envelope was heavy, thick cream paper with my full name printed in sharp black ink. Robert Bob McAllister. Inside, a Santa Fe attorney politely informed me that Randall Pike, my second cousin, had passed and named me sole heir to his estate. I hadn't seen Randall since I was 17, fresh boots in the Army, both of us laughing like idiots on a bus ride to Fort Benning. Then life split us apart. He went west chasing oil, I went east chasing wars. 50, 60 years later, his ghost reaches into my life with a number that doesn't even look real. $3,500,000. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I sat at my old oak table, staring at the letter. Coffee went cold, my hand trembled once, then steadied. I folded the paper, slid it under the table beam I hollowed out decades ago. The wood swallowed it like a secret. And here's the thing, I didn't tell a soul. Not Mark, not Allison, not the grandkids. I wanted to see them raw, to measure love without a dollar sign attached. That evening, Allison invited me for dinner. Her house in Plano smells like garlic and expensive candles, the kind that cost more than a week's groceries when I was young. My 4 grandkids bounced between screens and cups stacked on the counter. Allison kissed my cheek, too bright, too rehearsed. Mark, my son, showed up in his business casual armor, tie loosened but still performing. How's the house, Dad? Those stairs treating you rough? The stairs and I have an understanding, I said. Then it came. Always does. Power of attorney, Mark suggested smoothly. Just medical stuff. Just practical. For me. Always for me. I smiled, nodded. Signed nothing. Back home, the house exhaled when I locked the door. Old walls know the truth. They hold it tighter than people. I poured myself whiskey instead of tea, stared at Ellen's photograph on the mantel, her eyes asking the same question. What are they really after, Bob? At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. A group chat, family, adults. Maybe they meant to keep me out. Maybe they forgot. Allison, if Dad falls, we're in a mess. I'm calling Dr. Peterson about an eval. Mark, do it. Also found a place in Lakewood. Cottonwood Terrace. Short-term trial. He'll adjust. Allison, house is too big. We can help sell it. He'll be relieved. Mark, I'll handle the bank accounts. Less stress for him. Less stress. For him. I stared at the glowing screen until my hand steadied. That old coldness rose up. Not grief, not fear, but the kind of calm I carried in jungles and deserts when men were planning my death. I pulled a yellow legal pad and wrote in block letters. Operation, family test. Stage 1, act weak. Stage 2, fake debt notice on fridge. Stage 3, bait Mark into pushing papers. Stage 4, record everything. The cassette recorder clicked on, tidy, honest. My house became a war room. My family became the enemy. By midnight, I knew 2 things. 1, my children weren't as careful as they thought. 2, they were already planning my burial. I just hadn't died yet. And that was their mistake. Morning sunlight came in like a thief, slipping through the blinds and scattering gold across the floorboards. I stood in the kitchen with a mug of coffee that tasted like burnt pennies and stared at the fridge. The fake delinquent notice I'd printed the night before looked good there. Red stamp across the top. Past due, final warning. Big enough to be noticed, small enough to feel private. I leaned my cane against the counter, though I didn't need it, and waited. By noon, Mark showed up. Always punctual when there's something to sniff out. He walked in without knocking. His house already, in his head. His cologne hit before his voice did. Dad? He said too loudly. Thought I'd check on you. Brought lunch. 2 sandwiches in a paper bag, as if bribery came on sourdough. He saw the fridge before I said a word. His eyes snagged the paper like a hawk on a rabbit. What's this? He pulled it off, reading fast. Just bills, I muttered, playing tired. They pile up. Dad, this is serious. His voice dropped, grave, rehearsed. Your utilities could get shut off. Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged. Didn't want to bother anyone. Mark set the paper on the table between us. You can't manage this alone. I could. He hesitated, then slid the idea across like a card in poker. You could let me handle your accounts. Power of attorney. Streamline things. There it was. Stage 1 complete. I looked him in the eye, let the silence work. Soldiers know, silence forces truth out faster than questions. Just think about it, he added quickly. No pressure. But I'd already seen the hunger flicker in his eyes. That night, Allison called. Her tone was sugar, but her words were knives. Dad, I heard you've been forgetting bills. Maybe it's time you moved closer to us. Cottonwood Terrace has beautiful one-story homes. Safer, easier. Safer from what? The squirrels? I asked. She laughed a little too sharp. From accidents. You're 80, Dad. Things happen. Things happen. Sure. Especially when someone's pushing. I needed a second trap. So I left the drawer in my desk cracked open, a manila folder inside labeled will. Inside wasn't my real will. That one lives somewhere no one will find, but a forgery I'd spent half the night typing. It said every cent would go to a veterans fund. At breakfast the next day, Leo, my oldest grandson, wandered into the study. Teenagers think they're ghosts. He didn't know I was watching from the hallway mirror, my reflection cut into slats by the blinds. He opened the drawer, slid out the folder. Read fast. His face drained like milk down a sink. He put it back sloppy, didn't notice the recorder's red light blinking on the shelf. 5 minutes later, I heard whispers upstairs. Allison's voice, hushed and sharp. He's leaving it all to charity? No, that can't happen. Perfect. Stage 2. Successful. By evening, the family group chat was alive with coded panic. Mark, we need to get this sorted before it's too late. Allison, I'll talk to Dr. Peterson about an evaluation. If we prove decline, we can intervene legally. Leo, Grandpa's hiding stuff. I saw it. I screenshotted every word. Evidence piling up like sandbags. That night, I sat in the dark living room. Only light came from Ellen's photo frame. She looked younger there, laughing with a bowl of peaches in her lap, back when life was about sweetness, not tests. Ellen, I whispered. They're already circling. A train howled in the distance, long and lonely. I held the recorder in my palm, felt its weight. Stage 3 was next, baiting Mark into pushing real papers. The test wasn't just working, it was showing me something uglier. My children weren't just greedy. They were organized, calculating, and desperate. At midnight, I heard a creak on the stairs. Slow, careful. I gripped the old army knife in the drawer beside me. Shadows moved in the hallway. The door eased open an inch. I didn't breathe. A silhouette paused, then retreated. A whisper followed. Not tonight. He's awake. Not tonight. My blood went cold, then hot. They weren't just planning. They were rehearsing. Tomorrow, I'd spring stage 3. And this time, I wouldn't just be testing them. I'd be hunting. The morning smelled of rain and wet asphalt. Dallas sky heavy, bruised gray, like even the weather knew what was coming. I poured myself bitter coffee, left the fake delinquent notice still pinned on the fridge, and waited. The knock came at 9:07 a.m. sharp. Mark, always punctual when there's money on the line. He stepped in with a leather folder tucked under his arm, too polished for a casual visit. His smile was practiced, lawyer slick even though he never studied law. Dad, thought we could take care of some things today. Get ahead of problems. I leaned on my cane and nodded like a tired old man. Ahead of problems, huh? Sounds smart. He laid the folder on the table. Smooth, careful. I didn't need to look. I already knew what was inside. Power of attorney. Banking access. Probably even house deed paperwork slipped in between standard documents. Allison's worried, he said, flipping pages. She just wants to know you're secure. This way, We can streamline everything. Bills, property, medical, all in one place. Less stress for you. For me, I repeated. Yes, all you'd have to do is sign here and here. He tapped the papers, his ring clicking against the wood like a gavel. I picked up the pen, let my hand tremble just enough. Then I stopped, looked him dead in the eye. You sure this is best for me? He didn't blink. Absolutely. I smiled, small and tired. Then let's do it. His relief was so strong it fogged the air. I signed, slowly, with shaky lines. But not the papers he thought. The switch had been made last night, my real documents neatly swapped with decoys I'd prepared. What he slid into his folder were worthless pages stamped void in faint watermark. What I kept was a recording of the entire exchange. His voice on tape saying, all you'd have to do is sign here. That afternoon, Allison came by. She brought cookies, the kind she only bakes when she wants something. Her smile was stretched tight. Dad, Mark told me you finally signed the paperwork. That's such a relief. Relief, huh? I asked, breaking a cookie in half. Chocolate chips melted, sweet but bitter on my tongue. She nodded eagerly. This way, we can help you manage things. You don't have to worry anymore. I studied her face. The eagerness wasn't about my well-being. It was about access. You checked the will lately? I asked casually. Her hand froze halfway to the cookie plate. What? Never mind, I said, waving it off. Just old man talk. But I saw it in her eyes. She already knew about the fake will. Leo had told her. Their panic was building behind that pretty smile. That night, I left another trap. A small envelope on my desk, just sticking out enough to tempt. On the front, bank statements. Inside, nothing but blank paper. At 11:20, I heard the floorboards creak. Soft footsteps, then a drawer sliding open. A pause, a whisper, got it. The recorder blinked red from the shelf. I didn't move, didn't confront. Not yet. Let them dig their hole deeper. When the house settled again, I leaned back in my chair, knife open on my knee, Ellen's photo on the mantel watching me with steady eyes. Not long now, I muttered, because testing was over. The evidence was piling high, and I was ready to show them exactly what kind of old man they were dealing with. I woke before dawn, same as I used to in the barracks, the sky still dark and heavy. The house was silent, but silence never fooled me. Silence had a pulse if you knew how to listen. Somewhere upstairs my fake will still sat waiting like bait on a hook. Somewhere in my desk drawer the recorder slept with evidence of greedy hands. And somewhere deep in my chest the old soldier's clock ticked steady, telling me it was time to move from observation to action. The first strike had to be clean. Not loud, not messy, just enough to shift the ground under their feet. I brewed coffee that tasted like ash. Then I pulled out the envelope with Randall's lawyer's letter. I didn't open it, just touched it, reminded myself the money was real, reminded myself I wasn't hallucinating some cruel joke of fate. Then I slid it back into the hollow beam under the table. Safe, secure, untouchable. At 9 sharp, Mark called. His voice had that fake cheer men use when they think they've already won. Dad, good news. I showed the documents to a friend of mine who works in estate law. He said everything looks solid. We'll start transferring accounts next week. I let him talk, nodded into the silence, and told him I was grateful. The pen had barely dried on those worthless decoys he thought were gold. Let him build castles on sand. The bigger the structure, the louder the collapse. By afternoon, I drove out to the VFW hall. The smell of stale beer and dust greeted me like an old comrade. I met with Carl, a friend from back, when our knees still worked like they should. He owed me favors, and I knew he still had connections with an attorney who handled veterans' trusts. I need something drawn up, I told him. Tight. Ironclad. Not 1 cent goes to my kids. Not one. You understand? Carl studied my face, saw the cold steel under the wrinkles, and nodded without asking questions. Within an hour, we had a new draft of a will that gave every dollar of Randall's legacy to a foundation for injured soldiers and a children's hospital in Dallas. A small slice I carved out for my neighbor Ruiz, the only man who still checked on me without asking for anything in return. That was my true will, and I locked it in the ammo can in my closet. That evening Allison came by unannounced, smile too bright, carrying a casserole she clearly hadn't cooked herself. "Dad, you shouldn't have to worry about groceries. We can help with meals." Her eyes darted around the kitchen, searching for signs of weakness. Then she spotted the fake bank statements envelope I'd left half open on my desk. Her smile faltered for just a second, then snapped back into place. "What's that?" she asked too casually. I shrugged. "Old bills. Nothing important." She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. I saw her hand twitch, wanting to grab it, but she forced herself to stay polite. She left 20 minutes later, casserole untouched, her perfume still hanging in the air like smoke after a gunshot. At midnight, I set my trap. I placed the recorder under the desk again, this time angled toward the living room where I knew Allison would sneak if she came back. Then I left the house dark, only the porch light burning like a weak guard. I pretended to sleep. Sure enough, around 1:30, the faint groan of the front door reached me. I didn't move. My breathing slow, steady. I heard steps on the carpet, cautious but not cautious enough. A whisper. Allison's voice, sharp, tense. "Check the drawer. He keeps it here." Another set of steps, lighter. Leo. My grandson. The betrayal hit deeper than I expected. I gripped the knife under my pillow and forced my body to stay still. The recorder blinked red as they rifled through papers, pulled out the fake statements, cursed under their breath. Leo whispered, "It's just blank. This isn't it." Allison hissed, "Keep looking. He's hiding something. No one leaves millions to charity." Millions. So they'd already pieced it together, already suspected more than I let on. That meant my mask was slipping. It was time to tighten the rope. The next morning, I walked into Allison's kitchen like nothing had happened. Kids on their tablets, TV buzzing with some cartoon laugh track. She poured me coffee, pretending she'd slept easy. I smiled, played dumb, thanked her for last night's casserole. Her hand shook just a little as she set down the cup. She knew I knew. She just didn't know how much. That afternoon, I went to the bank. The young teller looked at me like I was just another old man fumbling with deposit slips. I leaned in and said quietly, "I want to move my accounts into a trust. Irrevocable. Under my name only." She blinked, then nodded. "Of course, Mr. McAllister. Do you want family members listed as beneficiaries?" "No," I said flat. "Only these." I handed her the papers Carl's lawyer had drafted. Her face didn't move, but her eyes widened just enough. She knew what she was handling. By evening, the trust was secure, everything untouchable. That night I sat at my kitchen table, the house creaking around me, and I wrote in my notebook. Stage 4, escalation. Force them into open conflict. Make them show their teeth. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Family group chat again. "Mark, Dad's getting forgetful. I'll schedule the bank meeting. We can't wait too long." Allison agreed. "He left papers out last night. He's slipping." "Leo, what if he changes the will?" "Mark, then we intervene legally. We'll find a way." I closed the phone, my jaw tight. They weren't waiting for me to fall. They were pushing. They were rehearsing my funeral before I'd even stopped breathing. I poured myself another whiskey, sat in the dark, and listened to the rain drum against the windows. My children thought they were playing chess with a tired old man. But I'd played this game in jungles, deserts, and battlefields. I'd buried men who thought they were smarter than me. It was time for the first strike. Tomorrow, I'd let them know I wasn't nearly as weak as they hoped. And when they realized the money was gone, locked where their hands could never reach, I wanted to be there to see their faces. Because nothing tastes sweeter than the moment your enemy finally understands they've underestimated you. The night after I left the house, I sat alone in my motel room, staring at Martha's photo on the nightstand. Her calm eyes seemed to ask me if I was finally ready to stop being everyone's mule. I whispered back, "Yes. It's over." My fingers tapped against the table stacked with paperwork, bank accounts, insurance, bills, everything I had carried on my back for years. Now it was time to cut the ropes. I started with the mortgage. For 5 years, my name had been the only thing keeping that house afloat. I called First National, canceled the automatic payments. The rep asked me if I was sure. I said, completely. My voice didn't shake. Next came the car insurance. Then the credit cards Tiffany had been running up with Harry's help. I removed them as authorized users, blocked every new charge. By the time the coffee in my mug had gone cold, the chain was broken. I felt lighter than I had in decades. The phone stayed quiet for 2 days. Then the storm hit. Missed calls stacked up, Tiffany crying, Harry cursing, voicemails bouncing between rage and begging. Dad, what the hell is going on? The bank says you stopped the payments. Clark, you fix this right now? I'm not going to be humiliated like this. Their desperation grew by the hour, and I listened to every second of it with the calm of a man who had finally stopped bleeding. On Wednesday morning, a knock rattled my motel door. Through the peephole I saw them, Tiffany in a wrinkled sweater, Harry looking like a wolf cornered with nowhere to run. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. Dad, please, Tiffany started, her eyes rimmed red. The bank's threatening foreclosure. The insurance is gone. We can't even keep the lights on without you. Just help us this one last time. Behind her, Harry shoved forward, his jaw tight. You're doing this out of spite. Over a damn beer. You're ruining our lives. I let his words hang in the air. Then I said evenly, no, I'm simply not paying for them anymore. That house. My name's on the deed. You were just guests. Tiffany's face crumpled, torn between loyalty to her husband and the father who had carried her entire life on his shoulders. We can work this out, Dad. Please. Harry tried to sound reasonable, his voice oily with false calm. Look, we all said things we didn't mean. But you can't just pull the rug out. That's our credit, our future. No, I cut him off. It's mine, and you lost your right to it. I started to close the door. Tiffany's voice broke. What about family? I looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Family works both ways. For years I carried you. When it was time for you to show me respect, you chose him instead. Harry's mask slipped. His teeth clenched. You crazy old bastard. Say another word, and I'll call the police. This is private property. You're trespassing. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time in years, they saw me clearly. Not a tired old man. Not a bank account with legs. Just a man who finally said no. Harry grabbed Tiffany's arm. Come on. They stalked back to their car, but Tiffany looked over her shoulder, her face pale with fear of what their future would look like without me propping it up. When the door shut behind me, I leaned against it and exhaled. Phase 1 was done, but I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I met an old friend at the diner, Bob Harrison, a banker I'd worked with for years. Over coffee, he told me something that froze my blood. Harry had tried months earlier to take out a $50,000 home equity loan on my house. He brought forged paperwork, claimed the property was his. Bob caught it and shut it down, but the attempt was real. So Harry's little beer-demanding tantrum hadn't been about dominance. It had been about control. He'd already planned to steal from me. The disrespect was just the surface. Underneath was fraud, lies, gambling debts deeper than I'd guessed. I left the diner, went straight to the courthouse. Filed eviction papers, stamped and signed. 30 days, then the sheriff's department would be at my side. Legal, clean, undeniable. Next stop, Detective Jim Morrison, who confirmed everything I already suspected. Harry owed nearly $20,000 to the casino. Creditors were circling like vultures. Back in my motel, I opened a new file on my laptop. Evidence, Harry. I started piling everything inside. His attempted fraud, his gambling debts, the recordings of his threats, Tiffany's messages. Every piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin he built for himself. But I wasn't finished yet. If they wanted to see me as weak, If they wanted to use me like a wallet, they were about to learn what kind of man they had underestimated. I was done being their foundation. Now I was the wrecking ball. I didn't sleep much that night. The motel walls were thin, letting in every cough, every creak of pipes, every drunk yelling in the parking lot. But that wasn't what kept me awake. It was the knowledge that Mark and Allison weren't just greedy. They were cornered animals. And cornered animals don't just beg. They bite. By morning, my phone was stacked with messages. Allison's voice cracked with fake sweetness. "Dad, we can meet for breakfast. Talk it through." Mark's tone was colder, clipped. "This is getting out of hand. You need to reconsider before you ruin everything." Everything. Not their marriage. Not their dignity. No, the money. Always the money. I poured bitter motel coffee and stared at Ellen's photo. Her eyes said, "Don't flinch. Don't fold." I nodded back. "Not today." The knock came around 10. Mark again. This time his smile was gone. He carried the folder like a weapon, slapping it onto the table. "Dad, this is ridiculous. The bank's already asking questions. You can't just yank payments and leave us exposed." I kept my voice steady. "I can, and I did." Allison walked in behind him, looking like she'd rehearsed the role of the peacemaker. "Please, Dad. We're family. Let's not make this worse." Worse. I leaned back, my cane resting across my knees. "I gave you both rope, and you tied a noose with it. You think worse hasn't already happened?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Look, we made mistakes, but you're not getting any younger. You need us as much as we need you. Be smart. Work with us." That was his angle now, control dressed as partnership. I almost laughed. "You know what I did last night?" I asked. They exchanged nervous glances. Allison forced a shaky smile. "What?" I filed eviction papers. The color drained from Allison's face. Mark froze, then barked a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You wouldn't." I did. "Sheriff's office will have copies to you by tomorrow." Silence. Heavy, ugly silence. Allison's hand went to her mouth. "Dad, you can't. The kids. The kids aren't the problem. Their parents are." Mark leaned in close, voice low and dangerous. "You'll regret this." I didn't blink. "So will you." He stormed out, Allison trailing after him with tears streaking her makeup. I waited until the door slammed before I reached into the drawer. Recorder still blinking red. Every word captured. By noon, my phone lit again, this time from Detective Morrison. "Clark, thought you should know. Your son-in-law's name came up again. Casino IOUs. Bad ones. The kind where people get kneecaps broken if they don't pay." I grunted. "Figures. You want to press charges on the forged loan attempt? Paperwork's ready if you do." "Not yet," I said. "Let him sweat a little longer." The detective chuckled. "You always were patient." Patience, yes. But my patience had teeth now. That evening, I drove back past my own house. The lights were blazing, like they thought wasting electricity might prove they were still in control. From the street, I saw silhouettes arguing. Allison pacing, Mark shouting, kids crying in the background. The perfect little empire crumbling from the inside out. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, my boots crunching on the gravel. In my jacket pocket, the last envelope. Inside, copies of every recording, every forged document, every photograph of Mark's late-night sneaking. Insurance, tucked safe and ready to deliver to the bank, the police, even the kids if it came to that. At the corner, I stopped and looked back at the house Ellen and I had built into a home. The porch swing we'd stained together. The maple tree where Allison used to climb with scraped knees. All of it poisoned now by greed. A neighbor stepped out to smoke, gave me a nod. I nodded back and turned away. Not yet. Timing was everything. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed and laid the envelope beside Ellen's photo. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from clarity. They thought I was weak. They thought I was blind. They thought old age meant surrender. But the trap was nearly closed. And when it snapped, it wouldn't just take their money. It would take the lies they'd built their lives on. I whispered into the empty room, "Tomorrow. I'd been patient, too patient. For weeks I'd let Mark and Allison spin their little web of lies and entitlement, thinking they were clever, thinking the old man in the corner chair was too tired to fight back. But the clock was almost at zero, and tonight I was going to remind them what kind of man raised this family. The sheriff's office had served the preliminary eviction notices. Morrison had hinted the DA was circling Mark's gambling debts. And Allison, well, she'd been talking too loud on the phone, too often. I had half a dozen recordings of her whispering to a lawyer about assets distribution, as if I were already 6 feet under. They thought they'd cut me out clean. They had no idea I was sharpening the blade from the other side. That night, I returned to the house under cover of dusk. Porch light was on, blinds open just enough. Inside, the scene was chaos. Allison pacing the kitchen with her phone pressed tight, whispering fiercely. Mark sitting at the table with a pile of bills, his hands trembling, a bottle of whiskey half gone beside him. And my grandchildren upstairs, music blasting, drowning out the storm brewing below. It was the kind of domestic circus Ellen would have hated. I stayed in the shadows outside long enough to catch the good part. Allison's voice sharp and desperate. If Dad doesn't sign over power of attorney, we're finished. We'll lose everything. Mark slammed his fist on the table. Then we make him sign. He's weak. He won't hold out. Weak. I felt the word like a blade against my ribs. My hand tightened around the recorder in my pocket. Every word captured. Every ounce of poison bottled. I stepped inside without knocking. The front door was still mine, after all. The sound of it shutting behind me froze the mid-sentence. Mark's face drained, Allison's eyes wide as if she'd seen a ghost. Evening, I said, dropping my keys on the counter. Seems I walked into a strategy meeting. Allison stammered. Dad, we were just planning my funeral finances? I cut her off. Don't strain yourself. I already heard. Mark tried to recover, his lawyer's smile crawling back onto his face. Dad, you've misunderstood. We're worried about you, your health, your future. We only want what's best. I laughed, a short, cold sound that silenced the room. What's best for me? Or what's best for your debts, Mark? He froze, eyes flicking to Allison. She turned pale. My words had hit home. I know about the casino, I said quietly. The IOUs. The kind of men who don't send polite reminders when payment's late. Mark stood up too fast, chair screeching across the floor. Who told you that? Enough people. I stepped closer, my cane tapping against the tiles like a metronome. And I've got every word you two whispered tonight saved. So when you tell the bank, the police, the kids upstairs that you were only worried about poor old Dad, they'll hear the truth instead. Allison's mask cracked. Tears welled up, whether from fear or guilt I couldn't tell. She reached out like she still had some power over me. Please, Dad, don't do this. We can fix everything. No, I said. You already broke it. The silence after that was thicker than smoke. Mark's fists clenched, Allison's shoulders sagged, and I felt the weight of decades, raising them, protecting them, giving them more than I ever had, pressing down on my chest. Ellen's voice whispered from the photo in my pocket, don't fold. And I didn't. I want you both out of this house by Friday, I said. Sheriff's Department will see to that if you don't. You'll take your lies, your debts, and your crocodile tears with you. And if either of you so much as calls my lawyer again, I'll make sure every bank in Dallas hears the tapes before the ink on your eviction notice is dry. Mark tried to bluster, words spilling without conviction. You can't just throw us out. We're family. People will talk. Let them talk. I leaned close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath. At least they'll be talking about the truth. Allison sank into a chair, face buried in her hands. Mark glared at me, but behind the anger was something else. Fear. Real fear. The kind a man feels when the game is over and the dealer's already raking in the chips. I turned and walked upstairs. My grandchildren's music leaked through the doors. For a moment, I thought of knocking, of trying to explain. But not yet. They'd see soon enough who'd been protecting them all along. Back in my room, I locked the door and laid out the evidence on the desk. The recordings, the forged papers, the eviction orders. The war was almost won, but I knew my children well enough to realize one thing. They wouldn't surrender quietly. And Friday night, when the sheriff came knocking, that was when the real explosion would happen. Friday came heavy with Texas heat, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes the air feel like it's waiting for something ugly to happen. I woke up before sunrise, same as always, brewed a pot of bitter coffee, and laid out the folder of evidence one last time. Recordings, forged papers, eviction orders, my war chest, everything ready for the final strike. By 8 o'clock, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up the driveway, tires crunching on gravel Ellen and I had poured 20 years ago. Deputies stepped out, crisp uniforms, mirrored sunglasses. They weren't here for me. They were here for my children. Mark and Allison stumbled out of the house like they'd been dragged from a nightmare. Faces pale, words tumbling over each other. Allison pleaded, voice high and shrill, tears painting black streaks down her cheeks. Mark tried his lawyer routine, threatening, bluffing, citing statutes he half remembered. None of it mattered. The deputies had the paperwork. My paperwork. The kids upstairs watched from the landing, silent and wide-eyed. My grandchildren, innocent spectators to the wreckage their parents had made. That image cut deep, but I didn't flinch. They needed to see the truth with their own eyes. When the deputies handed Allison the notice, she crumpled to the ground, sobbing into her manicured hands. Mark cursed me, shouted that I was senile, that none of this would hold up. The deputies didn't argue. They just stood firm, professional, waiting for him to shut his mouth. I leaned on my cane, steady as stone. You thought you could take everything from me, I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through their noise. Turns out, I was the one holding all the cards. Mark lunged at me then, fury spilling past his polished facade. The deputies pinned him back before he touched me, their hands gripping his arms tight. I saw fear flicker behind his anger, the look of a man finally realizing the war was lost. Allison lifted her head, mascara streaking her face, and spat words that tried to sting. You'll die alone, Dad. Alone in that big empty house. I didn't even blink. Better alone with the truth, I said, than surrounded by liars calling themselves family. The deputies marched them to the curb. Mark still shouting, Allison still crying. My grandchildren remained on the stairs, clutching each other, confused and terrified. I looked at them, softer now. None of this is your fault, I said. Remember that. They didn't answer, but they heard me. By noon, the house was quiet again. Their cars gone. Their voices gone. Just the ticking of Ellen's old kitchen clock and the cicadas buzzing outside in the heat. I sat at the kitchen table, papers stacked neat in front of me, and finally let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I should have felt empty, but instead, I felt whole. For the first time in months, maybe years, the balance was back in my hands. They'd tried to play me for weak. Tried to write me off as some tired old man waiting to die. They'd forgotten who I was. I was Bob Carter, soldier, builder, father, the man who had carried this family on his back for 80 years. And today, I reminded them what that meant. The sun dropped low, spilling red light across the porch Ellen used to love. I sat there with a glass of whiskey, watching shadows stretch long across the yard. My grandchildren's faces lingered in my mind, scared, innocent, unsure of what came next. Maybe, one day, they'd understand. Maybe they'd see that this wasn't about money. It was about respect. When the last of the daylight slipped away, I stood, steady and unshaken. The war was over. My house was mine. My dignity was intact. And my children, well, they finally learned who their father really was. I whispered the words into the night air, sharp as a knife and final as a gunshot. They'll never forget me. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It helps us bring you more stories that hit just as hard.